My name is Carmen, and at 58 years old, I thought I understood what heartbreak was. 30 years as a high school counselor losing my husband Jack to cancer, I had seen pain. But nothing prepared me for the text from my son Daniel that morning. "Don't come to family dinner, we're cutting ties." My fingers trembled as I read it again, wondering if he had meant to send it to someone else. After several minutes, I simply typed back, "Got it," hiding the way my heart shattered. Before I continue this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Take a second to drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe if stories about family bonds speak to you. I grew up in a small town in Connecticut where everyone knew everyone else's business. My parents ran the local hardware store, and I spent my childhood stocking shelves and watching how they treated every customer like family. That's where I learned the value of deep connections, of making people feel seen and heard. Those lessons served me well throughout my life, especially as a high school counselor, helping teenagers navigate their most turbulent years. I met Jack during my sophomore year at the University of Connecticut. He was studying engineering, and I was pursuing education. We literally bumped into each other at the library. I dropped a stack of books, and he helped me gather them. Our first date was coffee at the campus cafe, which turned into a 5-hour conversation about everything from our childhood dreams to our favorite movies. By our third date, I knew he was the one. We married right after graduation, when we were both 22 and filled with big dreams but empty pockets. Those early years were tough financially. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment where the heat barely worked in winter. Jack was starting his career at an engineering firm, and I was teaching at the local high school. We saved every penny for a down payment on a house eating ramen noodles more often than I care to remember. Daniel was born 3 years into our marriage. I still remember holding him for the first time, this tiny human with Jack's eyes and my stubborn chin. From the moment I held him, I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. 2 years later, we welcomed Sophia, and our family felt complete. We finally saved enough to buy a modest 3-bedroom house in a good school district when Daniel was 5. It wasn't fancy, but it had a backyard where the kids could play, and enough room for everyone to have their own space. Jack and I spent weekends painting walls and planting a garden, turning that house into a home filled with laughter. As the children grew, we established traditions that became the cornerstone of our family life. Sunday dinners were sacred. No matter how busy our week had been, we all gathered around the table to share a meal and talk about our lives. Even during the teenage years, when friends and activities pulled at them, Daniel and Sophia knew that Sundays were for family. Daniel was always my sensitive child. Where Sophia was bold and outspoken, Daniel observed quietly, taking everything in. He loved baseball, and I never missed a game. I'd sit in the bleachers cheering him on, feeling prouder than words could express when he pitched his first no-hitter. Science was his passion too. I helped him build volcano models and solar system dioramas for the science fair. He won first place in 8th grade with his project on renewable energy beaming as he accepted the ribbon. Jack was the one who taught Daniel how to change the oil in a car, how to fix a leaky faucet, and how to stand up for himself without using his fists. They would spend hours in the garage working on projects together, classic rock playing in the background. The bond between father and son was beautiful to witness. When Jack was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, Daniel had just started his junior year of college. The prognosis was grim, 6 months at most. Daniel came home every weekend to be with his father, sitting beside his hospital bed, sharing stories and memories. Jack fought hard, but passed away 5 months after his diagnosis. Daniel was devastated, we all were, but he showed such strength during that time, helping with funeral arrangements and supporting Sophia and me through our grief. The years after Jack's death were difficult. There was an emptiness in our home that nothing could fill. But we pulled together as a family, our Sunday dinners becoming even more important as we navigated life without Jack. Daniel graduated college with honors and landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm in the city, just a 30-minute drive from our home. Sophia was completing her master's degree in education, following in my footsteps. Daniel met Tiffany at a company event 5 years ago. She was beautiful, ambitious, and worked in the accounting department. When he first brought her home for Sunday dinner, she charmed us all with stories about growing up in California and her dreams of starting her own business someday. I was happy to see Daniel smiling again, looking at Tiffany the way Jack used to look at me. Their wedding was beautiful, a garden ceremony with twinkling lights and flowers everywhere. Daniel looked so handsome in his suit, and when he saw Tiffany walking down the aisle, the joy on his face made my heart soar. I gave a toast at their reception, welcoming Tiffany to our family and sharing stories of Daniel growing up. Everyone laughed and cried, and it felt like our family wasn't just surviving after Jack's death. We were growing and finding joy again. The first year of their marriage, Daniel and Tiffany still came to Sunday dinners regularly. Tiffany would bring homemade desserts and ask me for family recipes. We went shopping together for furniture for their new apartment, and she seemed genuinely interested in hearing stories about Daniel's childhood. I was careful not to overstep, remembering how my own mother-in-law had sometimes been a bit too involved in our early marriage. I wanted to be supportive without being intrusive. But slowly things began to change. The Sunday visits became less frequent. Daniel would call with excuses. They were too busy, Tiffany wasn't feeling well, they had other plans. When they did come, Tiffany seemed distant, checking her phone constantly, or finding reasons to leave early. I noticed how she would sometimes cut Daniel off when he was speaking, or roll her eyes when he talked about his childhood memories. I tried reaching out to Tiffany directly, inviting her for lunch, or to go shopping, thinking perhaps she felt overwhelmed by family gatherings. But she always had a reason why she couldn't make it. The few times we did meet one-on-one, the conversation felt strained with long, awkward pauses. At the last family gathering 2 weeks ago, the tension was palpable. Daniel and Tiffany arrived an hour late. Daniel apologized profusely, but Tiffany barely acknowledged me when they entered. During dinner, she kept whispering things to Daniel that made him look uncomfortable. Sophia tried to lighten the mood by sharing funny stories from her classroom, but Tiffany barely cracked a smile. After dinner, I overheard Tiffany in the kitchen, not realizing I was approaching. "I can't stand these dinners," she was saying to Daniel. "Your mother is always judging me, looking at me like I'm not good enough for her precious son." My heart sank as I quietly backed away, not wanting them to know I had heard. I spent the rest of that evening trying to compensate, being extra warm to Tiffany, complimenting her outfit and her recent promotion at work. I brought out homemade cookies for their children, my beloved grandchildren, Max and Lily, now 4 and 2 years old. Tiffany barely let me interact with them, always finding a reason why they needed to go home right after dinner. As they were leaving, I hugged Daniel tightly, telling him how proud I was of the man he'd become. I saw tears in his eyes as he hugged me back, and for a moment, I felt my son return to me. But then Tiffany called from the car, and the moment was gone. Little did I know that would be the last normal interaction I would have with my son before everything fell apart. The morning I received that text message was like any other Tuesday. I woke up at 6, made my coffee, and sat on the porch watching the sunrise, a habit I developed after Jack died. The birds were singing and the air was crisp with early spring. I had just started checking my emails when my phone buzzed with a message. Seeing Daniel's name on the screen made me smile. Perhaps he was checking in about the upcoming Sunday dinner or sharing new pictures of the grandkids. But when I opened the message, my world stopped. "Don't come to family dinner, we're cutting ties." I stared at those words, reading them over and over. My coffee grew cold beside me as I tried to make sense of it. Was this some kind of joke? Had he meant to send this to someone else? My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered how to respond. Should I call him, demand an explanation? In the end, shock and hurt made me reply with just 2 words: "Got it." I waited for his response for some clarification or apology, but none came. After 30 minutes, I tried calling him, but the call went straight to voicemail. "Daniel, it's Mom. I got your message and I'm confused. Please call me back when you can." My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, too calm for the hurricane of emotions inside me. I called 3 more times throughout the morning, each time reaching only his voicemail. I sent another text. "Daniel, I'm worried. Whatever is wrong, we can talk about it. Please call me." Still nothing. As the reality of what was happening began to sink in, I recalled the dinner from 2 weeks ago. There had been tension in the air from the moment they arrived. Daniel seemed on edge, jumping slightly whenever Tiffany spoke to him. He kept glancing at her before answering any questions I asked, as if seeking permission to speak. I remembered going to the kitchen to get dessert and overhearing Tiffany's harsh whisper, "She's always trying to undermine me with the kids. Did you see how she brought those cookies after I specifically said they can't have sugar after 6? She doesn't respect me as their mother." Daniel's response was quiet, but clear. "Mom doesn't mean any harm. She just loves the kids." "Don't defend her," Tiffany had snapped. "You always take her side." I had quietly backed away, not wanting to embarrass them by revealing I'd overheard. During dessert, I'd made a point of saying how wonderful Tiffany was with the children trying to smooth things over without acknowledging the tension. Now sitting with this text message, I wondered if that incident had been the final straw for Tiffany. But cutting ties entirely, that seemed so extreme, so final. I scrolled through my recent interactions with Daniel looking for clues. There was the group text where I'd asked if the children could stay with me for a weekend, so Daniel and Tiffany could have a getaway. Tiffany had responded that they weren't comfortable with that arrangement yet. I hadn't pushed, though it hurt that after 4 years of being a grandmother, I wasn't trusted to care for my own grandchildren. There was the birthday party for 4-year-old Max last month, where I'd been invited, but then relegated to sitting in the corner, while Tiffany's parents took center stage, helping Max open presents and taking all the photos. I had brought a special gift, a baseball mitt that had been Daniel's at that age, carefully preserved. When Max opened it, his eyes lit up, but Tiffany quickly said, "That's nice, but we already got you a better one," showing a brand new expensive mitt that made my gift look shabby in comparison. And there was the Easter gathering where Tiffany had forgotten to tell me the time had been changed, resulting in my arriving as everyone was finishing the meal. Daniel had looked mortified, but said nothing, as Tiffany claimed there must have been a miscommunication. These incidents had hurt, but I'd brushed them aside, making excuses. Tiffany was under pressure at work. She had different ideas about parenting. She was establishing boundaries. Never did I imagine it would lead to this, a complete severing of our relationship. By noon, I had called Daniel 6 more times, each call going to voicemail. I tried texting again. "Daniel, please, I don't understand what's happened. Whatever I've done, I want to make it right." Still no response. I called Sophia, wondering if she knew what was happening, but she didn't pick up either. This was unusual. Sophia almost always answered my calls or texted back quickly if she was busy. A terrible thought struck me. Had Daniel and Tiffany turned Sophia against me too? Was my entire family cutting me out of their lives? The panic that rose in my chest was suffocating. I tried to distract myself by cleaning the house, but everywhere I looked were reminders of my children. Daniel's high school graduation photo on the mantel, the handprint art projects from elementary school that I'd framed and hung in the hallway, the family photo albums filled with Christmas mornings, beach vacations, and birthday celebrations. By mid-afternoon, I was sitting on Daniel's old bed, clutching the teddy bear he'd loved as a child, tears streaming down my face. What had I done to deserve this? How could my son, the little boy I'd nursed through chickenpox and comforted after nightmares, the teenager I'd taught to drive and helped with college applications, the young man I'd supported through his father's death, how could he cut me out of his life with a simple text message? The pain was physical, a weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I thought of my grandchildren. Would I never see them grow up? Would they forget me? Or worse, be told lies about why I wasn't in their lives anymore? As the hours passed, my shock gave way to a deep, aching sadness. The house had never felt so empty, not even after Jack died. At least then, Daniel and Sophia had been by my side, sharing the grief, helping each other heal. Now I felt truly alone. By evening, I had called Daniel 12 times and Sophia 4 times. No response from either of them. I checked social media, wondering if there would be any clues there, but found that I seemed to be blocked from both their accounts. This deliberate exclusion felt like another slap in the face. I couldn't eat, couldn't focus on television or reading. I just sat in my living room as darkness fell, the silence of the house pressing in on me. That's when I realized I needed to reach out to someone, anyone who might help me make sense of what was happening. With trembling fingers, I picked up my phone and called the one person I knew would answer. After staring at my phone for what felt like hours, I finally called my best friend Margaret. We'd been friends since our children were in preschool together, over 30 years of shared birthdays, school events, and life milestones. If anyone would understand and help me through this, it would be Margaret. She answered on the second ring, her cheerful voice a stark contrast to my emotional state. "Carmen, what a nice surprise. I was just thinking about you and that recipe you shared last week. The lemon cake was a hit with the book club." The moment I tried to speak, my voice broke, and tears I'd been fighting all day spilled over. "Margaret," I managed to say, "something terrible has happened." "Carmen, what is it? Are you hurt?" The immediate concern in her voice made me cry harder. Between sobs, I explained about Daniel's text and my unsuccessful attempts to reach both him and Sophia. As I spoke, the reality of the situation hit me anew, and my words became almost incoherent. "I'm coming over," Margaret said firmly. "Don't argue. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make us some tea." The simple task of boiling water and finding tea bags gave me something to focus on besides my pain. By the time Margaret's car pulled into my driveway, I had regained some composure, though my eyes were swollen from crying. Margaret didn't bother with pleasantries when I opened the door. She simply wrapped me in a tight hug, the kind that says more than words ever could. We moved to the kitchen, where I poured tea with shaking hands. "Show me the text," Margaret said, her tone gentle but firm. I handed her my phone, watching as she read Daniel's message and my brief response. Her forehead creased as she scrolled through my unanswered calls and messages. "Have you tried reaching out to Tiffany directly?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, I'm afraid that would make things worse." Margaret nodded thoughtfully. "You might be right about that. But what about Sophia? You said she's not responding either." "No, and that's not like her. She always returns my calls even when she's busy." Fresh tears threatened as I considered what this might mean. What if they've all decided to cut me out? What if I never see my grandchildren again? Margaret reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Let's not jump to worst-case scenarios. There could be an explanation we haven't considered." "Like what?" I couldn't imagine any explanation that would justify such a cold dismissal. Margaret took a deep breath. "Carmen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to really think before answering. Has Tiffany been slowly isolating Daniel from you and other family members?" "What do you mean?" "Think about it. The canceled plans, the misunderstandings about invitations, the way she controls his interactions with you and the children. Does any of that sound familiar?" I thought about all the incidents over the past few years. The gradual reduction in Sunday dinner attendance, the way Tiffany always had the final say in family plans, how Daniel seemed to defer to her on everything from what the children could eat to how long they could stay at family gatherings. "Yes," I admitted slowly. "But that's just marriage, isn't it? Couples make decisions together." Margaret shook her head. "There's a difference between joint decisions and one person controlling all family relationships. Carmen, what you're describing sounds like grandparent alienation. It's a form of family estrangement where one parent, often a daughter-in-law or son-in-law, systematically cuts off the grandparents from their grandchildren and adult child." "That sounds so calculated, so cruel. Daniel wouldn't allow that." I protested, though even as I spoke, doubt crept in. "It happens gradually," Margaret explained gently. "The controlling partner isolates the spouse from their support network bit by bit. They rewrite the narrative, making normal family interactions seem problematic or threatening." I remembered how Daniel had changed over the years of his marriage. From the confident, warm-hearted son who called me several times a week to the cautious, guarded man who now seemed to weigh every word before speaking. How he would glance at Tiffany before answering even the most innocent questions about work or the children. "I've seen it happen to other friends," Margaret continued. Maureen hasn't seen her grandchildren in 3 years because her son's wife decided Maureen was too controlling. All Maureen did was offer to babysit when their second child was born. A cold feeling settled in my stomach as I recognized the pattern. Hadn't Tiffany reacted strangely when I'd offered to watch the children so she and Daniel could have a weekend away? As if my offer was somehow threatening rather than helpful. But what can I do? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. If Tiffany has turned Daniel against me, how can I possibly fix this? First, we need more information, Margaret said practically. We need to speak with Sophia and find out what she knows. If Tiffany is isolating Daniel, she may be working on alienating Sophia too. The thought of losing both my children was unbearable. But Sophia isn't answering my calls either. Then we'll try her husband Patrick. He's always been level-headed and he adores you. He might have insight into what's happening. Margaret's calm, methodical approach was exactly what I needed. While I sat at the kitchen table, she called Patrick from her phone, explaining that we were trying to reach Sophia about a family matter. To my relief, Patrick answered and quickly put Sophia on the line when he heard the concern in Margaret's voice. Margaret handed me the phone, and I nearly broke down again at the sound of my daughter's voice. Mom, what's wrong? I saw your missed calls, but I've been in meetings all day. Oh, Sophia, I said, my voice cracking. Daniel sent me a text this morning saying they're cutting ties with me. I've been trying to reach him all day, but he won't answer. I was afraid you were cutting me off too. What? Sophia's shock seemed genuine. That's ridiculous. Why would Daniel do that? Have you two had a fight? No, nothing like that. The last time I saw him was at family dinner 2 weeks ago. Things were a little tense with Tiffany, but nothing that would explain this. There was a pause on the line. When Sophia spoke again, her voice was hesitant. Mom, there's something you should know. Tiffany has been saying things about you to other family members. My heart sank. What kind of things? She's been telling people that you criticize her parenting, that you try to undermine her relationship with the kids that you're controlling, and refuse to respect their boundaries. Sophia's voice was apologetic. I didn't tell you because I knew it wasn't true, and I didn't want to hurt you. The injustice of these accusations stung. That's not true. I've been so careful to respect their decisions about the children, even when I disagreed. I know, Mom. I've defended you whenever I heard these things. But Tiffany is very convincing, and Daniel backs her up. I heard the frustration in Sophia's voice. Patrick and I have been worried about this for a while. It seems like Daniel just goes along with whatever Tiffany says these days. Can you come over? I asked, suddenly needing my daughter's presence. I don't know what to do, and I'm afraid of making things worse. We'll be there in an hour, Sophia promised. And Mom, we'll figure this out. You're not going to lose Daniel or the grandkids. I won't let that happen. After hanging up, I filled Margaret in on the conversation. She nodded grimly. It's as I suspected. Tiffany is creating a narrative where you're the villain justifying cutting you out of their lives. But why? What have I done to make her feel threatened by me? Margaret sighed. It might not be about you specifically, Carmen. Some people are just controlling by nature. They want their partner all to themselves with no competing influences or loyalties. As we waited for Sophia and Patrick to arrive, Margaret made more tea and insisted I eat something. The simple act of having a friend take charge of not being alone with my pain and confusion helped restore a small measure of calm. When Sophia arrived, she hugged me tightly, and I clung to my daughter, as if she might disappear too. Patrick embraced me next, his tall frame reminding me so much of Jack that fresh tears sprang to my eyes. We gathered in the living room, where Sophia revealed more about what had been happening behind the scenes. Tiffany had been systematically turning family members against me for months, claiming I was possessive of Daniel and jealous of her role as mother to my grandchildren. She even told Aunt Linda that you criticized how she dresses the kids, Sophia said, referring to Jack's sister. Aunt Linda was shocked because she knows how supportive you've always been. Patrick, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. I have a friend who's a family therapist. Would you mind if I called her for advice? This situation seems beyond normal family tension. With my permission, Patrick called his friend Dr. Reed and put her on speakerphone. After explaining the situation, Dr. Reed offered her perspective. "What you're describing sounds like a pattern of control and isolation," she said. "It's unfortunately common in family estrangement cases. The controlling partner gradually separates their spouse from family support systems, often by creating conflicts where none existed or exaggerating minor disagreements." "But how do we counter this?" I asked desperately. "Daniel won't even speak to me." "The key is not to escalate the situation," Dr. Reed advised. "Don't send angry messages or make accusations against Tiffany, as tempting as that might be. That will only reinforce the narrative she's created about you being difficult or aggressive." "So I'm supposed to just accept being cut out of my son's life?" The injustice of it made my voice rise. "No, but we need to be strategic," Dr. Reed said calmly. "Your daughter can serve as a bridge, maintaining communication with both you and her brother. The goal is to keep lines of communication open while gathering more information about what's really happening in Daniel's marriage." As we talked, a growing concern for Daniel himself emerged. If Tiffany was controlling enough to cut him off from his family, what was his home life like? Was he simply appeasing his wife, or was he himself a victim of emotional manipulation? "I'm worried about my grandchildren too," I admitted. "If Tiffany is this controlling with family relationships, how is that affecting Max and Lily?" "That's a valid concern," Dr. Reed acknowledged. "Children thrive when they have relationships with loving grandparents. Being cut off from that support isn't in their best interest." By the end of the call, we had a clearer understanding of the dynamics at play, but I felt no closer to resolving the situation. How could I fight against accusations that weren't true? How could I reach Daniel if he wouldn't even speak to me? As Sophia and Patrick prepared to leave, my daughter hugged me fiercely. "I'm going to call Daniel tonight," she promised. "I won't mention that we've talked, but I'll try to find out what's really going on." "Be careful," I warned. "I don't want Tiffany to cut you off too." "I can handle Tiffany," Sophia said with a determination that reminded me of myself at her age. "No one messes with our family like this." After everyone left, the house felt empty again, but not as desperately so. Knowing that Sophia, Patrick, and Margaret were on my side gave me strength. I wasn't alone in this fight, even if the path forward remained unclear. That night, I slept fitfully, dreaming of Daniel as a little boy, running to me with scraped knees and tear-stained cheeks, seeking comfort only his mother could provide. In my dream, I reached for him, but he kept slipping away, his face changing from child to adult, his eyes filled with a confusion that broke my heart. I woke at dawn with a renewed determination. I wouldn't give up on my son. Whatever was happening, whatever Tiffany's motivations, I would find a way to maintain the connection with Daniel and my grandchildren. The alternative, accepting this estrangement as permanent, was simply unthinkable. The next morning, Sophia called early. "Mom, I spoke with Daniel last night," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. I sat up straighter, clutching my coffee mug. "What did he say? Is he okay?" "He was defensive at first, saying you had crossed boundaries with Tiffany one too many times. When I pressed for specifics, he couldn't give any clear examples." Sophia paused. "Then Tiffany got on the phone." My stomach clenched. "What happened?" "She went ballistic, Mom. Started listing all these supposed incidents where you undermined her parenting or criticized her choices. Half of them never even happened, and the rest were completely twisted versions of reality." "Did Daniel say anything while this was happening?" "That's the concerning part. He was completely silent. I could hear him in the background, but he didn't defend you or challenge anything Tiffany was saying. It was like he'd completely surrendered his own perspective." The image of my strong, independent son being silenced like that made my heart ache. "Then what happened?" "When I tried to reason with her, Tiffany threatened to cut me off too. Said I was just like Mom, and they needed to protect their family from toxic influences." Sophia's voice trembled with indignation. "Then she said something that really worried me. She told Daniel to remember their agreement, and he immediately backed her up, saying they'd made their decision together. What agreement could they possibly have made? I wondered aloud. I don't know, but it felt rehearsed, like she was prompting him to recite a prepared statement. The whole conversation was on speakerphone, and at one point, I heard her hissing instructions at him when she thought I couldn't hear. A chill ran down my spine at the image of Tiffany controlling what Daniel could say, even on a phone call with his sister. That sounds like verbal abuse, I said quietly. It does, Sophia agreed grimly. And there's more. After Tiffany hung up, Daniel called me back privately about 20 minutes later. He sounded really stressed and kept saying he didn't have much time because Tiffany was in the shower. I leaned forward, hope rising that my son had reached out independently. What did he say? He apologized for the text message, Mom. Said Tiffany had insisted on it after finding out you'd offered to help Max with his baseball swing. Apparently she's convinced you were trying to make her look bad because she doesn't know much about baseball. The absurdity of this accusation would have been laughable if the consequences weren't so painful. All I'd done was offer to play catch with my grandson when he showed interest in the sport Daniel had loved as a child. Daniel sounded exhausted, Sophia continued. He said things have been intense at home lately and asked me not to call for a while because it makes things harder. Then he heard the shower turn off and hung up abruptly. My maternal instinct to protect my child surged, even though Daniel was a grown man now. Sophia, this doesn't sound like a healthy relationship. It sounds controlling, maybe even emotionally abusive. That's what Patrick said too. After the call, he started researching emotional abuse and control tactics. He found an article about coercive control that described exactly what seems to be happening with Daniel. Sophia's voice dropped. Mom, Patrick thinks Daniel might be in an abusive relationship. The word abuse hung in the air between us. I had always associated abuse with physical violence, not the kind of psychological manipulation that seemed to be happening to my son. What does the article say about coercive control? I asked, trying to understand. It's a pattern of behaviors used to control someone through isolation, gaslighting, emotional manipulation, and sometimes financial control. The victim gradually loses their sense of self and their independent relationships. They start to believe they deserve the treatment, or that it's normal. This description matched the changes I'd observed in Daniel over the years. His increasing isolation, his deference to Tiffany, the way he seemed to have lost confidence in his own judgment. Patrick found something else, Sophia continued. He looked up Tiffany on social media and found posts from her previous relationship. There are concerning similarities in how that relationship ended, with her ex being cut off from his family and friends. The realization that this might be a pattern for Tiffany, rather than a specific reaction to me, brought a strange mixture of relief and deeper concern. Relief that perhaps I hadn't somehow failed as a mother, but profound worry for what this meant for Daniel's well-being. What should we do? I asked, feeling out of my depth. If we confront Tiffany directly, she'll just use it as evidence that we're against her. Patrick's friend Anthony from college is still close with Daniel, Sophia said. They've known each other since freshman year. Patrick called him last night and Anthony confirmed our concerns. He said Daniel has gradually stopped responding to invitations to hang out, always with excuses about family obligations or Tiffany having other plans. Has Anthony noticed changes in Daniel's behavior? Yes. He said the last time they managed to meet for drinks about 3 months ago. Daniel seemed nervous the entire time, checking his phone constantly. When Anthony asked if everything was okay, Daniel admitted that Tiffany gets upset when he spends time with old friends because they don't understand their marriage. This was another red flag. Isolating a partner from friends is a classic control tactic. Did Daniel say anything else to Anthony? According to Anthony, Daniel mentioned that Tiffany monitors his text messages and emails to avoid misunderstandings. He played it off as a mutual agreement for transparency, but Anthony found it disturbing. Each new detail painted a clearer picture of a relationship built on control rather than trust. My concern for Daniel was now overshadowing my hurt at being cut off. This wasn't just about me losing access to my son and grandchildren. It was about my son potentially losing himself in a manipulative relationship. We need a plan, I said, my counselor training kicking in. If Daniel is in this kind of relationship, directly confronting Tiffany will only make things worse for him. We need to be strategic. That's what Patrick said too. He suggested we consult with a specialist in domestic abuse, particularly someone who understands that men can be victims too. There's still this perception that men can't be controlled or abused by female partners, but it absolutely happens. I agreed to this approach, and Sophia promised to set up a consultation. In the meantime, she would maintain casual contact with Daniel, being careful not to trigger Tiffany's suspicions. After hanging up, I went to my home office and pulled out the family photo albums. I needed to remind myself of the strong, confident person Daniel had been before Tiffany. There he was at his college graduation, arm around his dad, both beaming with pride. There he was coaching Little League the summer before he met Tiffany, confident and happy. Comparing those images to the Daniel I'd seen at our last dinner, constantly checking his phone, asking Tiffany's permission to have a second helping of dessert, apologizing for sharing a childhood memory she deemed boring. The transformation was heartbreaking. I knew then that this wasn't just about fighting to maintain my relationship with my son and grandchildren. It was about fighting for Daniel himself, for his right to maintain family connections, to make his own choices, to be the person he was meant to be, rather than who Tiffany demanded he become. The path forward would be delicate and potentially dangerous for Daniel if handled poorly. But sitting in my quiet house surrounded by memories of happier times, I made a promise to myself and to my absent son: I would not give up. With love, patience, and proper guidance, we would find a way to reconnect, and hopefully to help Daniel recognize the unhealthy dynamics in his marriage before they caused irreparable harm. Over the next 2 days, our family mobilized like a well-coordinated emergency response team. Patrick reached out to Anthony, arranging for him to accidentally run into Daniel at the coffee shop near his office. Sophia consulted with a domestic abuse counselor who specialized in male victims, gathering information about coercive control and effective intervention approaches. Margaret helped me document the pattern of isolation and control we'd observed, creating a timeline that made the gradual nature of Tiffany's manipulation disturbingly clear. The consultation with the abuse counselor, Lisa Martinez, was particularly enlightening. Men often don't recognize when they're in controlling relationships, she explained during our video call. Society conditions them to believe they should be able to handle relationship problems on their own, that seeking help is a sign of weakness. How can we help Daniel see what's happening without making him defensive? I asked. The key is non-judgmental communication, Lisa advised. Avoid directly criticizing Tiffany or making him choose between his wife and his family. Instead, focus on specific behaviors and how they impact him and the children. Should we confront Tiffany directly? Sophia asked. Lisa shook her head firmly. That could escalate the situation and put Daniel in a more difficult position. Remember, he lives with Tiffany. Any confrontation could result in increased control or punishment once they're alone. This sobering reminder of Daniel's vulnerability kept us focused on a careful, measured approach. We couldn't rush in with accusations and demands, no matter how justified they felt. Meanwhile, Anthony's chance meeting with Daniel yielded concerning information. Daniel had seemed nervous throughout their brief conversation, repeatedly mentioning he could only stay for 15 minutes because Tiffany expected him home. When Anthony suggested getting together for their usual basketball game on Saturday, Daniel had looked almost panicked, saying he needed to check the family schedule first. The old Daniel would never have hesitated, Anthony told Patrick on the phone. He loved our basketball games. Now he acts like accepting an invitation from an old friend is some kind of major decision requiring permission. Even more concerning was what Anthony noticed when Daniel's phone rang during their conversation. He jumped like he'd been shocked, Anthony reported. When he saw it was Tiffany calling, his whole demeanor changed. He answered immediately, turning away from me to explain in detail who he was with and why. It was like watching someone report to a prison warden. These observations confirmed our fears that Daniel's situation went beyond normal marital compromise. The control Tiffany exerted wasn't just affecting his relationship with me, it was impacting all his social connections and his basic autonomy. Sophia spent hours digging through old emails, finding messages from Daniel that showed his gradual personality change. In emails from 5 years ago, before meeting Tiffany, his writing was confident and full of plans for the future. Over time, his messages became shorter, less personal, with frequent references to checking with Tiffany before making even minor commitments. I contributed by gathering photos that documented Daniel's transformation, not just in his expressions, which had grown increasingly guarded in family photos, but in his body language. In recent pictures, he always stood slightly behind Tiffany, his posture less confident, his smile seeming forced. By day 3 of our information gathering, we had compiled substantial evidence of a troubling pattern. The question now was how to use this information to help Daniel without triggering a complete family rupture that could leave him even more isolated. "We need a safe, neutral environment for an intervention," Lisa advised during our follow-up consultation. "Somewhere Daniel feels comfortable away from Tiffany's influence." Margaret offered her vacation home at the lake, a place where our families had spent many happy summers together. "Daniel has always loved it there," she pointed out. "It holds good memories for him, and it's private enough that he might feel safe opening up." The plan began to take shape. Anthony would invite Daniel for what he'd describe as a guys' weekend at the lake house. Patrick would join them, making it seem like a casual reunion of old friends. Once there, with professional guidance from Lisa, they would gently help Daniel recognize the controlling patterns in his relationship. "What about me?" I asked, feeling both hopeful and anxious about this plan. "Should I be there too?" Lisa considered this carefully. "Initially, no. Daniel's text message to you indicates Tiffany has successfully positioned you as a threat to their marriage. Your presence might make him defensive from the start. Let Anthony and Patrick establish a safe space first, then potentially bring you in if Daniel seems receptive." Though painful, this made sense. My primary concern wasn't asserting my rights as a mother, but helping my son recognize his situation. If stepping back temporarily would increase our chances of success, I was willing to make that sacrifice. With the plan in place, Anthony reached out to Daniel, positioning the weekend as a much-needed break from work stress rather than a family intervention. To our collective surprise and relief, Daniel agreed almost immediately, saying he could probably get away for Saturday, but would need to be home by Sunday morning. The quick acceptance suggested two possibilities. Either Daniel was desperate for connection with old friends, or he didn't think Tiffany would object to a gathering that didn't include family members she had deemed toxic. As Saturday approached, my anxiety grew. What if our assessment was wrong? What if Daniel was simply establishing healthy boundaries rather than being controlled? What if our intervention pushed him further away instead of helping him? Lisa assured me these doubts were normal. "Trust the process," she advised. "If we're wrong, the worst that happens is Daniel gets annoyed at his friends for expressing concern. But if we're right and do nothing, the consequences for Daniel could be severe." The night before the planned intervention, I barely slept. I kept imagining scenarios where Daniel stormed out, where he cut ties with Sophia and Patrick too, where I lost all connection with my son and grandchildren permanently. But I also imagined success. Daniel recognizing the control tactics, seeking help, rebuilding his confidence and independence. At dawn, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, watching the sunrise as I had done every morning since Jack died. "I wish you were here," I whispered to my late husband. "You'd know exactly what to say to help him." As the golden light spread across my garden, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. Whatever happened today, we were acting out of love for Daniel. That truth would have to be enough. Anthony's plan to get Daniel away for a guys' weekend worked better than any of us had anticipated. Daniel arrived at Margaret's lake house on Saturday morning, looking tired but genuinely pleased to see his old friends. Patrick was already there, having arrived the night before to help prepare. While I waited anxiously at home, Margaret stayed with me, providing distraction and support. Sophia called every hour with updates, relaying information from Patrick's text messages. "They're fishing on the dock right now," she reported mid-afternoon. "Patrick says Daniel seems relaxed for the first time in ages. He's already mentioned that Tiffany calls to check on him every 2 hours when he's away from home. Is that raising any red flags for him? I asked, hoping Daniel might recognize this behavior as controlling. Not yet. He justified it as her being worried about him driving on country roads. Sophia sounded frustrated. He has an excuse for everything she does. By evening, the men had moved their conversation to deeper topics. With gentle guidance from Anthony, who had been briefed by Lisa on how to approach the subject, they began discussing their relationships. Patrick shared some minor disagreements he and Sophia had worked through, creating an opening for Daniel to talk about his marriage. Daniel just admitted that Tiffany monitors all his text messages and emails, Sophia reported during her 8 o'clock call. He tried to play it off as mutual transparency, but when Patrick asked if he checks her messages too, Daniel got quiet. This was the first crack in the facade, the first hint that Daniel might be recognizing the one-sided control in his relationship. According to Patrick's texts, Daniel had grown increasingly pensive as the evening progressed, especially when Anthony shared stories from their college days, reminding Daniel of the confident, independent person he had once been. Around 11 that night, Sophia called again, her voice urgent. "Mom, something big just happened." Daniel broke down when Anthony asked why he never comes to basketball games anymore. He admitted that Tiffany doesn't allow him to spend time with friends unless she approves of the activity and the people involved. My heart ached at the image of my son finally acknowledging, perhaps for the first time, the extent of control he was living under. What happened then? Patrick said it was like a dam breaking. Daniel started sharing more examples. How Tiffany checks the mileage on his car to verify he's gone where he said he would, how she times his commute and questions him if he's 10 minutes late, how she controls all their finances even though they both work. Is he making the connection that this isn't normal or healthy? I think so. Anthony showed him the article about coercive control, and Daniel got really quiet reading it. Patrick said he could see the recognition in Daniel's eyes. At midnight, my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in days. Daniel. With trembling hands, I answered, "Hello, Mom." His voice sounded broken, vulnerable, in a way I hadn't heard since he was a child. "I messed up. I'm so sorry." Tears sprang to my eyes at the sound of my son's voice. "Daniel, it's okay. Whatever's happening, we can figure it out together." "No, you don't understand." He was crying now, the words coming between sobs. "I let her convince me that you were the problem, that you were trying to control us. But it was her all along. It was always her. Daniel, listen to me. I love you. I have always loved you, and nothing will change that. I sent that text because she made me choose. She said either I cut you off, or she'd take the kids and leave. I was so afraid of losing them, Mom. I didn't know what to do." The manipulation was even worse than we had feared. Using the children as leverage was a particularly cruel form of emotional blackmail. "She's been calling non-stop since I got here," Daniel continued. "I turned off my phone, but when I checked it just now, there were 99 missed calls. 99, Mom. Who calls someone 99 times in one day? Someone who needs to be in control," I said gently, trying not to sound accusatory. "Daniel, this isn't your fault. Controlling relationships develop gradually. The person being controlled often doesn't realize what's happening until they're already isolated." Patrick and Anthony showed me some articles about coercive control and emotional abuse. His voice was steadier now. It was like reading about my own life. All these things I thought were normal, or just Tiffany being protective. They're not normal at all. "What are you thinking now?" I asked carefully, not wanting to push him. "I can't go home tonight. I just can't face her knowing what I know now. Patrick said I could stay at your house for a few days while I figure things out. Would that be okay?" Relief flooded through me. "Of course. Your room is always ready for you. But what about Max and Lily? Will Tiffany let you see them?" Daniel's voice hardened slightly. "That's another thing. She's been using them as pawns, threatening to keep them from me if I don't do what she wants. But Patrick says that's not how custody works. I have rights too." It was encouraging to hear this glimmer of the old Daniel, the one who stood up for himself, who didn't simply accept unfair treatment. We'll figure it all out one step at a time, I assured him. After arranging for Daniel to come to my house directly from the lake, I called Sophia with the news. She and Patrick were already on their way, wanting to be there when Daniel arrived. Margaret stayed too, making coffee and preparing the guest room for Patrick and Sophia, who would spend the night to support Daniel. As we waited, I couldn't help remembering all the times I had waited up for Daniel as a teenager, worried when he was late from a party or a date. The maternal instinct to protect never fades, no matter how old your children become. When headlights finally swept across my driveway around 1 a.m, I resisted the urge to run outside. Daniel needed to come to me in his own time on his own terms. He entered the house slowly, looking both younger and older than his 35 years, younger in his vulnerability, older in the weariness etched on his face. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then he crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my shoulder like he used to do as a little boy. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "You're here now," I said, simply holding him tight. "That's what matters." As we broke apart, Sophia enveloped her brother in another hug, and Patrick clasped his shoulder in silent support. Margaret discreetly slipped into the kitchen to give us privacy, returning with mugs of hot chocolate, a childhood comfort food that brought a faint smile to Daniel's face. We sat in the living room, the same room where we had gathered for countless family game nights and holiday celebrations over the years. Daniel's phone kept buzzing with incoming calls and texts, which he silenced after checking that none were from the children's babysitter. "I need to tell you everything," he said, looking at me with red-rimmed eyes. "How it started, how it got so bad without me even realizing." For the next hour, Daniel talked and we listened. He described how Tiffany's control had begun with small comments about his clothes, or his friends gradually escalating to monitoring his whereabouts, isolating him from family and friends, and eventually controlling every aspect of his life, from finances to parenting decisions. "I kept making excuses for her behavior," he admitted, telling myself she was just anxious or that she'd been hurt in past relationships and needed reassurance. I thought if I just loved her enough, she'd feel secure and things would improve. But they never improved. Each concession he made only led to more demands, more control. By the time he realized how isolated he had become, it felt too late to change the dynamic. "The worst part was letting her come between us," he said, meeting my eyes. "All those stories she told me about you criticizing her or trying to undermine her with the kids. I see now they weren't true. But I believed her because she was so convincing, so certain." "Manipulative people often are," Patrick said gently. "They present their perspective with such conviction that you start to doubt your own memories and perceptions." Daniel nodded tiredly. "That's exactly what happened. I'd remember something one way, but Tiffany would insist it happened differently. Eventually, I just accepted her version of events because it was easier than arguing." As dawn approached, we had a clearer picture of Daniel's situation and the challenges ahead. Tiffany wouldn't relinquish control easily. There would likely be escalation, false accusations, attempts to turn the children against him. But Daniel was no longer alone in facing these challenges. "The first step is getting you professional support," Sophia said. "Lisa Martinez works with men in controlling relationships. She can help you navigate this process." "And we need to consult a family attorney about the children," Patrick added. "The most important thing is ensuring Max and Lily's well-being through whatever comes next." Daniel looked overwhelmed, but resolute. "I don't even know who I am anymore," he admitted. "I've spent so long trying to be who she wanted me to be, I've lost track of myself." I reached across and took his hand. "You're still you, Daniel. The core of who you are hasn't changed. It's just been buried under years of manipulation. We'll help you find yourself again." As the first light of morning filtered through the windows, Daniel finally fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from the emotional revelations of the night. I covered him with the quilt his grandmother had made, remembering the little boy who had once built pillow forts in this very room. The road ahead would be difficult. Extracting oneself from a controlling relationship is never simple, especially when children are involved. But watching my son sleep, I felt something I hadn't experienced since receiving his text message days earlier: hope. Daniel had taken the first crucial step toward reclaiming his life. He had recognized the unhealthy dynamics in his marriage and reached out for support. With professional guidance, family backing, and his own inner strength, he could rebuild his independence and create a healthier environment for himself and his children. As I quietly moved to the kitchen to start breakfast for everyone, I felt profound gratitude for the people who had helped make this breakthrough possible. Margaret, with her unwavering friendship, Sophia and Patrick, with their determined advocacy, Anthony, with his loyal outreach to Daniel, and Lisa, with her professional expertise. It would take time for Daniel to heal, for our family to fully recover from this period of estrangement. But we had taken the first steps together, and I was determined to walk beside my son every step of the way forward, no matter how challenging the journey might be. 6 months have passed since that night, when Daniel showed up at my doorstep broken, but beginning to see the truth about his marriage. The journey hasn't been easy, but the transformation in my son has been nothing short of remarkable. The first few weeks were the hardest. Tiffany, realizing she was losing control, escalated dramatically. She filed false police reports claiming Daniel was unstable and dangerous. She told the children terrible lies about why Daddy wasn't coming home. She sent mutual friends to spy on him and spread rumors in their community about his mental health. But Daniel was no longer facing these attacks alone. With Lisa Martinez's professional guidance, he learned to document everything, to respond calmly rather than defensively, and to prioritize his own mental health during the storm. The family attorney Patrick recommended helped Daniel establish temporary custody arrangements that, while not ideal, ensured he could see Max and Lily regularly. Those first supervised visits were heartbreaking. The children seemed confused and wary, having been told their father had abandoned them. But children are remarkably perceptive. By the third visit, Max was climbing into Daniel's lap for stories, and little Lily was giggling as he pushed her on the swings. Daniel attended therapy twice weekly, working through the complex emotions of recognizing and leaving an abusive relationship. "Men aren't supposed to be victims," he told me one evening after a particularly difficult session. That's what kept me in denial for so long. I felt ashamed that I couldn't stand up to her, that I let her control me. "Emotional abuse doesn't discriminate by gender," I reminded him, sharing what I'd learned from Lisa. "Anyone can be vulnerable, especially when the control happens gradually and is disguised as love or concern." Watching Daniel rebuild his confidence was like witnessing a flower slowly unfurl after a long winter. He started making decisions without seeking approval. Small things at first, like choosing what to eat or wear, then bigger steps like reconnecting with old friends and applying for a new job away from the company where Tiffany worked. 3 months after leaving, Daniel filed for divorce. Tiffany contested everything, dragging out the process with endless demands and delaying tactics. But her attempts to maintain control only reinforced Daniel's determination to break free. Each manipulative text or threatening phone call strengthened his resolve rather than weakening it. "I can see it all so clearly now," he told me as we sat on my porch swing one evening. "The same behaviors that once confused and paralyzed me now just confirm that I'm making the right choice." My own journey of healing paralleled Daniel's in many ways. I had to work through the hurt of being cut off, the anger at Tiffany's manipulation, and my guilt at not recognizing the signs of abuse sooner. "You couldn't have known," Sophia reassured me when I expressed these regrets. Tiffany was careful to present a different face to the world, and Daniel was protecting her, hiding what was really happening. "You did the best you could with the information you had." Gradually, our family rhythms began to reestablish themselves. Sunday dinners resumed now, with Daniel, Max, and Lily joining us on the weekends when Daniel had custody. The first time Daniel brought the children to my house, Max looked around wide-eyed at the photos on the walls. "That's Daddy when he was little?" he asked, pointing to a picture of Daniel at age 5 wearing a baseball cap too big for his head. "Yes, that's your daddy," I confirmed, He loved baseball just like you do. Mommy said you don't have any pictures of Daddy, Max said innocently. She said you didn't care about him when he was little. Daniel and I exchanged glances over Max's head, another reminder of the narrative Tiffany had created. But rather than getting angry, Daniel knelt beside his son. Sometimes grown-ups don't tell the truth when they're upset, he explained gently. Grandma has always loved me very much, and she has lots of pictures and memories of me growing up. Would you like to see more of them? Max nodded enthusiastically, and we spent the afternoon looking through photo albums, sharing stories, and beginning to repair the connection that Tiffany had tried to sever. 4 months after leaving, Daniel found a new apartment in a family-friendly neighborhood not far from my house. I helped him decorate the children's rooms, making them colorful and welcoming spaces where Max and Lily could feel at home. As we arranged stuffed animals on Lily's bed, Daniel paused, looking thoughtful. I couldn't have done any of this without you, Mom. When I sent that text cutting you off, I thought I was protecting my marriage, but I was actually cutting off my lifeline. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you for not giving up on me. I hugged him tightly, my own eyes wet. A mother's love doesn't stop because of a text message, Daniel. It doesn't stop for anything. As Daniel grew stronger, he began to help others in similar situations. He joined a support group for men in abusive relationships, eventually becoming a peer mentor for newcomers, still struggling to recognize and name their experiences. His background in marketing proved valuable as he helped the organization develop materials specifically addressing the unique challenges and stigma men face when seeking help for domestic abuse. The legal proceedings continued to be challenging with Tiffany, using every tactic to maintain control. But Daniel remained steady, focusing on what mattered most, creating a healthy, stable environment for Max and Lily. When the court-appointed psychologist recommended that Daniel receive primary custody due to concerns about Tiffany's manipulative behaviors, it was a validation of everything he had been working toward. Today our family gathered for a special Sunday dinner, celebrating Daniel's new beginning. He received the final divorce decree yesterday, officially ending his marriage to Tiffany. While there are still custody details to navigate, this represented a significant milestone in his journey to freedom. As I looked around my dining table at the faces I love, Sophia and Patrick, Daniel, Max and Lily, even Margaret, who has become like family through this ordeal, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. 6 months ago, I feared I had lost my son forever. Today he sat across from me, laughing at something Sophia said, looking more like himself than he had in years. After dinner, as the children played in the backyard, Daniel joined me in the kitchen, where I was loading the dishwasher. I've been thinking about everything we've been through, he said, picking up a dish towel to dry the serving platters. About how close I came to losing all of this. My family, my sense of self, my relationship with my kids. I nodded, giving him space to continue. The strangest part is that I'm actually grateful for that text message now, he said, surprising me. As painful as it was the catalyst that brought everything to a head. If I hadn't sent it, if you hadn't rallied everyone to help me see what was happening, I might still be trapped in that relationship, becoming less of myself every day. Sometimes the most painful moments lead to the most necessary growth, I reflected, though I wouldn't wish what we went through on anyone. Daniel set down the towel and turned to face me directly. I've learned that love doesn't control or isolate. Real love supports and strengthens. I see that in how you've loved me through this entire ordeal, Mom. Not by trying to make my decisions for me, but by being there while I found my own way back to myself. His words touched my heart deeply. Through all the pain and confusion of the past months, this was the greatest gift, knowing that my son understood the difference between controlling behavior and genuine love. The journey isn't over. Daniel continues his therapy, working through the lingering effects of years of emotional manipulation. The custody arrangement remains complicated with ongoing concerns about Tiffany's influence on the children. But the foundation has been rebuilt, stronger, more resilient, and grounded in honest communication and mutual respect. For other families facing estrangement or concerned about loved ones in controlling relationships, I would offer this advice from our experience. Don't give up. Reach out with compassion rather than judgment. Recognize that the person being controlled may initially resist help or defend their controller. Seek professional guidance rather than trying to handle it alone. And most importantly, maintain the connection however you can, being ready to offer support when the moment of clarity comes. If you're watching this and recognize signs of control or isolation in your own relationship or in someone you love, please know that help is available. No one deserves to be controlled or emotionally abused, regardless of gender or circumstance. The first step toward freedom is recognizing what's happening, and the second is reaching out for support. Has someone in your life ever tried to come between you and the people you love? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else recognize warning signs in their own relationships. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family bonds can survive even the most difficult challenges. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, true love empowers, it never controls.